Well, good morning, everyone. I think I know most of the people in the crowd, but my name is Rob Polson. I'm an instructor. I also, along with my wife, who's sitting over there, we own a Piper Archer here on the field, as we try to fly as often as possible, but it's never often enough, probably like most of you. So when Paul asked me to do a presentation in January, I think it was probably August, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, basking in the sunlight, and here we are in the freezing cold. Maybe not as enthusiastic as I was, Paul, but happy to do it nonetheless. So thinking about a subject that is useful to us as advocates of safety in our flying, accident reports. I think most of us have seen accident reports, read them at various times. I just wanted to, I thought it's a worthy subject for a number of reasons. One, I was thinking of diving right into the accident reports, and before I got too far, I realized that there's some things that I didn't know, and hence, more than likely, you guys don't know either, or if maybe you know bits of things like process. When am I legally obliged to report an accident? What is an accident? What's an incident? What's a serious incident? All these things I quickly realized as I was putting the presentation together that I didn't know much about a lot of this. So I'm going to start out talking about some of those definitions. So just be patient, and then eventually we'll look at a couple of accidents that are fairly typical ones, and we'll talk about what you can learn, why you should read them, and what that does for your general reservoir of knowledge. And that knowledge, as pilots, a lot of us here, we're not professional pilots. We're lucky if we fly 50 or 100 hours a year. So when we're making judgments during our flying, it'd be nice to have thousands of hours of experience annually, but we don't. So what do we have? We have our knowledge. So it's been a while since we got our certificates, if we're pilots, or perhaps we're students still working on certificates. But in addition to real-world experience, we can fill that reservoir of judgment, if you like, for want of a better word, by being good students, and being good students for things like accident reports. So this is a worthy topic, in my opinion. As we go along, please, we've got a mic. It's not a big room or audience anyway, so just raise your hand, ask questions, correct me. I'm certainly not claiming to know 100% of this, and we'll see how we do. So I'm going to talk about NTSB accident reports, and then I'm going to talk about NASA safety reports, which is a separate area that is equally interesting and useful for yourselves and for the aviation community and safety in general. Could it happen to me? What can I learn? NTSB and NASA ASRS safety reports. So, quick definition. What's the difference in effect between the FAA and the NTSB? I think pretty much know this one. FAA responsible for ensuring safety standards are met by overseeing the maintenance, operation, and manufacturing of aircraft, proposing, enforcing, amending, modifying, suspending, and revoking our certificates. NTSB, on the other hand, a separate organization, investigates civil aviation accidents to determine probable cause and make recommendations to reduce the likelihoods of similar accidents. Also reviews FAA enforcement decisions and provides an unbiased review for pilots and other airmen. I got wondering, how big is each of these organizations, just for the hell of it? The NTSB is minuscule compared to the FAA, as you can see here. Almost 45,000 full-time FAA employees and 114 employees on the NTSB side. And I think there's less, someone told me, I may be wrong, there are less than 6 actual accident investigators that roam the country investigating accidents. So that was a surprise to me, the difference in size of those organizations. All right, accident or incident. So you'll see when we get to looking at NTSB accident reports that they're defined either as accidents or incidents. What is an accident? What do you think an accident might be? Anybody? Damage? Bodily damage? Injuries? Okay. Occurrence associated with the operation of an aircraft taking place between the time any person boards the aircraft with the intention of flight and all such persons have disembarked, and in which any person suffers either death or serious injury. We'll get to what we mean by this. Or in which the aircraft receives substantial damage. Kind of seems a little vague to me. Incident. What's an incident? Means an occurrence other than an accident associated with the operation of an aircraft which affects or could affect the safety of operations. Any lawyers in here before I disparage lawyers? Oh, okay. Written by lawyers, it looks like. Okay, some additional definitions according to, I'm sure you'll read this on a daily basis. FAR Title 49, Paragraph 832. Substantial damage, what does it mean? It means damage or failure adversely affecting the structural strength, performance, or flight characteristics of the aircraft, which would normally require major repair or replacement of the affected component. I don't know what major versus minor is. Engine failure or damage, this is interesting. Engine failure or damage limited to an engine if only one engine fails or is damaged, bent fairings or cowling, dented skin, small punctured holes in the skin of fabric, ground damage to rotor or propeller blades, damage to landing gear, wheels, tires, flaps, engine, accessories, brakes, or wind kicks are not considered substantial damage. That was a lot of words, but there's a lot that's not considered substantial damage. But it's not clear cut. I think you'd all agree. It's definitely vague. Serious injury. Sorry, this is a little small to read from back there, but I'll read it. What do we mean by serious injury? Requiring hospitalization for more than 48 hours, commencing within 7 days from the date of the injury. 2, results in a fracture of any bone except simple fractures of fingers, toes, or nose. So there's an AOPA article I read when I was preparing for this, and an example it used was you take a friend flying, as they're getting in the plane, you slam the door, and they break their fingers. That's not a reportable accident. You slam the door, they break their wrist. It is a reportable accident. Who knew? They fall off the wing, break their leg. Reportable accident. Causes severe hemorrhage, nerve, muscle, or tendon damage. Involves any internal organ or involves second or third degree burns. Okay. All right. So we sort of know some of the definitions. Now we ask ourselves, well, when are we required to report? After an accident, as defined above somewhat ambiguously. After a serious incident. There's a new phrase there. We saw incident, we didn't see serious incident. Oh, what the hell is a serious incident? This is why I like doing presentations. I knew none of this, and I'm like, this is going to be fairly straightforward, and it isn't straightforward. So, what's a serious incident? A flight control system malfunction or failure, an in-flight fire, an aircraft collision in flight. That sounds pretty serious.
Well, only if you dent the plane accident.
Yeah, if you dent the plane, that's a good point. Damage to property other than the aircraft estimated to exceed $25,000 for repair, including materials and labor or fair market value in the event of loss. Release of all or a portion of a propeller blade from an aircraft, excluding release caused solely by ground contact. So I read that, say if you're taxiing along and your nose struts low and you hit a rock and a piece of the propeller flies off, that's not necessarily reportable. But I don't know. A complete loss of information, including flickering, for more than 50% of an aircraft's cockpit displays. So, Jim, your Cirrus loses 50% of your displays, you have to report this to the authorities.
Okay.
Hope it doesn't happen.
All right.
Damage to helicopter tail or main rotor blades, including ground damage that requires major repair or replacement of the blades. Lands or departs on a taxiway. Incorrect runway or other area not designed as a runway. Or, last but not least, And by the way, this is a partial list, as I put there. You'd have to go to the actual regulation to read them all. It's a long list of things. But I'm not that cruel to you that I listed 5 pages of them. So I think you get the idea. Okay. Accidents and serious incidents must be reported to which government entity? The FAA or the NTSB? Okay, very good. Now, there is no, I thought there was a 10-day rule or a 3-day rule or something, but the regulation itself says by the most expeditious means available. Has anyone here submitted a report to the NTSB that doesn't mind talking about it?
I have.
I'm sorry to hear that. How did it go? And how long after the incident or accident did you?
I was on the phone with them an hour after.
Okay.
And actually somebody stuck their head in the ambulance as we did. So,
Okay.
yeah, pretty quickly. But thankfully, the quick communication, I think, helped the whole process.
That's good.
But I brought my forms and I have lots of information if you need it.
Oh, that's great. Thanks very much. Glad to see you intact. Okay, so that's how to report it. There are the phone numbers. Pretty easy. We've all got phones these days. You can find it, within seconds. Who is responsible to submit the report?
You.
Who's you? Pilot command? That was my guess. The operator is responsible, defined as any person who causes or authorizes the operation of an aircraft, such as the owner, lessee, or bailee of an aircraft. I'm with you. What the hell is that? I don't really know. So
Flight instructor's off the hook.
yeah, right. So are we confused? I'm confused. Show of hands, who's confused? Pretty much. So there you go. They're complicated, they're ambiguous. If in doubt, you may want to obtain legal advice prior to submitting a report. There may be insurance reporting requirements and consequences from reporting or not reporting as well. And here's my presenter's waiver. I'm not a lawyer. This isn't my legal advice. You get the idea. You need to give some thought to this. Unless I don't know what your situation was, but it was probably pretty obvious that you needed to submit it. All right, so that's how to get reports into the system. In the system, there are thousands of reports going back to the 1970s at least. So this is where we're switching to talk about, okay, would I have avoided the same fate? So how many of you have read NTSB reports in the past? So most people are familiar with them. How many are like in the last year? Okay. So fairly regularly. So a lot of this is going to be old hat to you. And I think you'd agree that they're useful. They're useful in terms of asking yourself those questions. What happened there? They're not really useful in terms of trying to say, I agree or disagree with the conclusion of the NTSB, although sometimes it's fairly straightforward and you agree. Sometimes you're like, well, I don't know if that's really what happened. That's almost irrelevant here. I think the value in these reports is in looking at the information within each one, looking at weather conditions, looking at the flight, asking yourself, why did that pilot do that? Could I see myself of making that same decision? And if so, what do I need to change to prevent and provide myself a little more of a safety buffer? There's two main ways to look at the reports. Browsing by month, and the NTSB has changed their system over the years. I think it used to be a lot easier to browse the reporting. Now, at least on my machine, unless I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing and clicking the wrong part, to look at the PDF report, and all I'm doing here, by the way, is I'm just looking. I clicked on one of these months. I clicked on March 2024, and then you get a page you get pages of summaries. What you can then do, see the little plus sign there? If you click the plus sign, it will expand, and you can kind of at least get a sense of, in this case, it was a a beach musketeer, personnel issues, aircraft control, student instructed pilot, aircraft directional control, not attained or maintained, probable cause down there, and it might be something that you want to take a look at. If you want to take a look at it, you can click on the PDF final link, and you will get, this is just a snapshot of this particular report. Yes, Mark?
Rob, it used to be, it's been a while since I've been on there. You used to be able to search by tail number, by state. By
Yes,
year.
you can. I'll get to, so when I said there are two ways to look at it, the first one, I'm just saying you can browse, you can look at the monthly lists like I've been doing, and sometimes that's, you've got 10 minutes to spare, that's kind of an interesting way to do it. But yeah, next, after we look at this one, I'll get to how to actually be, how to narrow down the search that's maybe more relevant to what you're interested in that day. So here's an example. I just clicked on this one semi-randomly. It's an accident that occurred. It's a beach musketeer, loss of control on the ground. The student pilot owned the airplane and was receiving instruction in it. Attempting to land, gusty wind on runway 25, 5,000 feet long runway, 75 feet wide, hard surface. Touchdown on the runway, ballooned back into the air, subsequently drifted right off the runway. Student pilot attempted to abort the landing, descended, struck a runway sign. Recorded wind at the time of the accident, 25011, gusting to 19. Probable cause, student pilot's failure to maintain directional control, flight instructor's lack of remedial action during a landing attempt in a gusty wind. Okay, so again, you might ask yourself, what factors may have been in play in this accident? In a similar scenario, could it have happened to me? As a student, what about as an instructor? What can I learn as an instructor in here? What could I do to prevent this happening to me or my student on a future flight? So, again, we're not going to go through all of these fields, but sometimes it's interesting to kind of dive into here and look and kind of draw some conclusions from some of these fields. Here's the student pilot information, 32 hours, total all aircraft, 21 hours in that make and model. So you can kind of assume that they bought the plane, they did some initial instruction, 10 or 11 hours in a different type of airplane, and then they moved to the Musketeer. The flight instructor in this case looks like 2,115 hours. That's significant experience for an instructor. 18 hours in make and model. So not a ton of time in that particular make and model. So as an instructor, I'm thinking, all right, well, maybe what happened here was the instructor wasn't super familiar with the Musketeer. Maybe that was the first time he'd experienced a go around, and it happened to be in gusty conditions, let it get away from the student, dived in too late. The rest it didn't turn out too well. So again, we can't really know one way or another, but I would use this to say, all right, if I'm going to teach in a Musketeer, for example, I'm not that familiar with it. I've done most of my instruction in Cherokees and 152s and 172s. Then before I get into that situation, it behooves me to fly that plane myself, maybe look at the POH or flight manual, talk to somebody else, get a feel for the airplane myself before I get into that situation. Again, I'm not judging this particular accident. I'm trying to use it to teach myself things I might want to think about in the future. Make sense? So that drop-down list that we looked at also has a new, I don't know how long this has been available. Mark, I know when, years ago this didn't exist. I don't know when it first came to be, but docket. You can click on docket, and depending on the particular accident, you'll get a whole slew of available documents, from witness reports, photographs, weather reports, a lot of stuff. Photographs for sure. So this is just an example. If you dig down far enough, these are the photos from this particular accident in that Musketeer. So pretty useful. I don't know that we can draw too many other conclusions from this. Clearly went off the runway, as the report said. Some minor damage. This one didn't turn out too badly, but still a bad day for the student and instructor. Mark, to your point, perhaps it's more useful to do a custom search. So again, in the NTSB accident database, you can, for example, show accidents for your aircraft type only, maybe at a specific location, state or airport. Maybe you're flying to an airport you've never been to before, and you want to say, what sort of accidents have occurred at that? Is it a frequent accident hotspot? Why? Dig down and see. Perhaps there's some taxiways. There's a lot of, seem to be an unusual amount of incidents on the ground with incursions. Maybe there are some confusing intersections between runways and taxiways. I'm just for the hell of it, I put Cessna 172. So I'm looking for all fatal accidents in Ohio for a Cessna 172. In this case, New York State 172, serious, highest injury serious, phase takeoff. So they're fields that I selected on purpose, and this is it spit out one report, and this is it. This particular one, pilot rated witness reported seeing the airplane make an intersection takeoff from a 2,800 foot runway, resulting in 2,293 feet of runway available. Impacted a field near the departure end, came to rest upright. Review of the data, airplane actually required about 2,300 feet of runway to clear a 50-foot obstacle. Instead of departing with a tailwind and from an intersection, the accident could have been avoided. I don't know what we conclude from that, except that intersection departures should ring a big alarm bell, should raise a red flag and say, is this smart? Have I done the performance calculations? Is my safety margin wide enough? And I think hopefully most of us here would say no, that safety margin in this particular case was not wide enough by any means. Then again, if you're at Portsmouth or somewhere with an 11,000 foot runway and you're offered intersection takeoff, or recently at Quonset where we were, it's usually not an issue, to the point where you don't even really realistically need to make any calculations. You've still got 5,000 feet left. But anytime the runway gets short, intersection departures, probably not a good idea. That's what happened to that particular airplane that attempted that. Went right through the fence here. Okay, here's...
Don't they say that you should add like 10% for every 5 knots of tailwind, though?
Yeah, there are a number of rules of thumb like that. Yeah.
Issue than an intersection.
Yeah, I think it's both. It's like, okay, if I'm going to take the intersection and there's a tailwind, yeah.
Probably pretty stupid.
Yeah, bad decision. Yeah. But, what is that worth reading? Yeah, I think it's worth reading because it sort of reinforces that intersection departure red flag that that needs to pop up in your head, when you're making a judgment.
You also, every pilot should personal minimums.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the POA says, I have certain minimums. That's what I'm going to.
Absolutely agree. Yep. So here's another accident. It's in Ohio. Fuel exhaustion. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially what happened in this one, it's an interesting statement. The pilot noted that the fuel gauges were indicating lower than he had ever observed them to be. Do we call BS on that one? Okay. Flight revealed that about between 2 and 6 gallons of fuel could have remained at the time of the accident. Okay, the pilot reported that as he began a descent towards 15 Golf, looked at the fuel gauges, he noted he'd never recalled seeing them so low. He decided to divert to Fulton Airport to purchase fuel. All of a sudden, everything got quiet. We're out of fuel. He executed a forced landing to a parking lot. However, on final approach, landing gear impacted trees. Okay, follow-up interview. He stated he occasionally leaned the mixture, but not always. Running the engine more rich than normal. Okay, there's the unsurprising conclusion. This would have resulted in 2.38 gallons remaining at the time of the accident. I think pretty clear here. This guy pushed his fuel way beyond acceptable safety margin and paid the price. We don't know why he did it. Had he done it many times before? Probably. Right? Get home-itis. Has anyone here pushed their fuel further than they really meant to? I will confess I have. Once. And yeah, it kind of sobered me. I think I had the Cherokee has 2 tanks, and I think the fuel bill came in, and I think I had 6 gallons left, so 3 and 3, and it's practically unusable. And yeah, I screwed that up. And I remember flying past I was actually coming back from Beverly a couple of years ago, and I flew past Hanscom. I said, that'd be a pain in the ass. I'm just being honest. And I knew it's such a weird, strong feeling, get there-itis, that I'm an instructor, I know these things, and yet I still convinced myself that it was okay. So what I'm confessing this just to tell you that, trust that feeling and almost make it automatic that if you have that feeling, land and get fuel. Hopefully I'll never put myself in that position again, but none of us are immune to it. These guys are lucky they didn't die in this accident. And this is all because they pushed their fuel. Yeah. Okay. Last but not least on the NTSB reports, there's a pretty cool dashboard. I think this is fairly new. It's interactive. You'll find it on the NTSB website. You can click into any one of these boxes and it will expand the list of accidents. You can drill down into specific accidents and look at what happened. You can zoom in and out on the map. They're split. The coloring of those little circles matches these here, fatal and non-fatal accidents, and you can drill down by location. It's pretty good. So that's what I had on the NTSB side of the presentation this morning. So next up, I'm going to talk about the NASA managed aviation safety reporting system. But before we do that, any other thoughts, questions about the NTSB accident database? Yes, Bill.
I'm just going to throw out something that has kept me from doing some stupid thing. Is in my decision-making process, I imagine being interviewed by an NTSB
yeah.
and or a opposing counsel. Like, so, Mr. Kelly, can you tell me why you were aware of this and chose to continue the flight?
Yeah, I think you're right. And in the cold light, hard light of a courtroom, you sound pretty dumb.
Yeah, and that
But
just kept me from doing a few things. Just like,
yeah.
I think I could do that, and then I go, how would I explain that?
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. Yes.
I was just going to say, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer what the process was like for me. It was definitely intense, and the questions are deep. Like, to the point they wanted to know the latitude and longitude where the crash happened. They wanted to know the METAR. So, like, digging and finding all of that information. The 911 call was actually what gave me the lat long. And then I called the Quonset Tower to figure out what the local METAR was at the time of the incident or accident. So things like that you would never imagine that you're supposed to know or that they want, but they want every piece of information. And don't mess up your logbooks. Like your airframe, engine, all of your logbooks need to be on par. So you have to submit basically your whole life and your plane's life to them.
That's great advice. Yeah, none of us, all of us hopes never to be in that situation, but you're right, we should prepare assuming that we might be one day.
Make sure you're current on your flight reviews and your medical too.
Yep.
That's something they're definitely going to ask for.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yeah.
When you're talking about the reportable events, there was one on there that said when you lose 50% of your displays. Let me ask a question. How many people here fly on glass cockpit, exclusively on glass cockpit? Okay, a lot of people still flying on steam gauges. I want to talk to you about something that happened. I wrote an article last July. I was going to send it to AOPA. I haven't sent it. Nobody's seen the article yet. It was based on an experience that I had. Last July, I was instructing with a student in a twin-engine airplane, and complete glass cockpit, both sides. And this is an advanced student that basically is ready to solo in the airplane. And as an instructor, typically you start out, you're checking everything a student does, but when you have an advanced student, you get to the point, we were at this point where, all right, I'm going to say nothing. I'm going to let the student do what he would normally do, and I'm just going to sit there and observe what he's doing and watch what happens. And not say, if he screws up, yeah, I'll take the controls or something like that. All right, so here's what happened. We were doing a flight out of New Bedford, and we were going to Lake Placid, New York. And we took off, and the conditions were marginal VFR, and the ceilings were maybe scattered to broken 1400. And we took off. He's flying the airplane. I'm sitting there saying nothing. And we get up to around 2,000 feet. They were probably higher than that. We might have been up to 5,000 feet or something like that, above the clouds, talking to Providence, getting ready to cross the Sakonnet, and all of a sudden, primary flight display just goes dark like that. And I'm like, that's odd. All right, let's take a look at the, and so let's, use the other display. I think it was actually the co-pilot. It was my display on the co-pilot side. Just flickered, got some error messages, went dark, and I'm like, okay. I'm talking to Providence, whatever, and then a few minutes later, the other display, bam, goes dark. Everything went completely dark, and so I'm like, what the frick? I said, all right, first thing, I have flight controls. And I, talked to Providence, said, I'm declaring an emergency. We need to go back, to Providence. And, just found a hole in the clouds and put it down, got it on the ground. And we, sitting there with the student, now that, everything, we're on the ground, back at the FBO, engine's still running. And I'm like, what the hell just happened, And we're talking about it, and we start looking over it. And he's flying the airplane, and it's Cessna 421. You got a console on the left-hand side that the co-pilot can't really see. All the switches and everything, they'd have to turn on the alternators. That's really all it was. But, so we, basically turned the alternators back on. Everything came back to life. Waited for the, 80 AHRs to come back up. And, we were ready to scrap the trip. And he says, well, what do you think? We know what the problem was. What do you say we, refile and we'll go, okay. So we decided that we continued on our trip. But apparently that was a reportable event, not for me.
That's interesting, actually, because was it a reportable event? Because it wasn't really a failure; it was a failure of process.
Yeah,
right.
But the displays went dark.
Right.
You can imagine if you're in solid IFR and the displays go dark.
I think if you were in flight, it was probably reportable.
It could have.
No, you're probably right. Based on that definition, it's the time you board the airplane.
Right.
To the time.
So the title of my article is what do you do when the lights go dark, basically, and it happens because it's embarrassing when something like that happens, especially as a flight instructor. I should have checked my student, but again, advanced student, I'm just sitting there observing, and anytime anything you run out of, get real low on fuel, it's an embarrassing situation. It's hard to talk about it,
It is hard to talk about it.
But,
And in fact, when you lost your first display, did you report that to air traffic control?
We did that.
You're supposed to. If you lose anything in an IFR flight, and they're very specific in the FARs, but I lost an alternator over JFK once, and I reported it, and he said, do you want to declare an emergency? I said, no, I'd rather just land somewhere. And
But it was that quick. It was within a minute or so. We're still trying to figure out what the heck has happened, and all of a sudden the other one went dark. But you have a glass cockpit, and these things have backup batteries. And that's the whole thing. It's redundancy, completely dual displays. We got dual everything. We got dual engines, dual 100 amp alternators, but the alternators aren't on. And not only that, you have an old airplane that's been retrofitted. This airplane wasn't just, it's not like a Cirrus where it came with that. This is something that, this is a 40-year-old airplane that he just spent, a lot of money putting brand new state-of-the-art everything in it. And it can happen.
For sure. Yes, Jim.
What Bill just said, the first thing that he just said reminds me of something. He didn't do his checklist. And what it's been with the airlines and corporate, it's been drawn on me, I still do it till today, is checklist. Checklist.
Absolutely.
Checklist. And if you didn't turn on your alternators, that's
You missed the checklist. Yep. Great point.
What happens is, like gentleman says, if you have any loss of any kind of navigation, you're supposed to report it immediately to ATC.
Yep.
And what degree it affects you. So,
Yep, for sure.
let me tell you, it's not nice to lose it.
No.
And they're reporting it with air traffic control primarily, so they have a flag to know if something else goes,
Yeah.
I need to be prepared to help
Yeah,
this person.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
not really,
It's not punitive, it's like to help. Yeah, for sure. All right, very good. So we're going to switch subjects now and talk about the NASA-managed ASRS, or the Aviation Safety Reporting System. Who here has filed at least one so-called NASA report? Okay. Who's filed one within the last year? Okay. Paul, we got one back there. All right. Those of you who aren't familiar with the ASRS system, I'm going to play. It's an 8-minute video produced by NASA. They'll do a much better job than I could do trying to explain the same thing. So we'll play the video, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it afterwards. We good to go?
Welcome to this presentation on the NASA Aviation Safety Reporting System. NASA ASRS is a confidential, voluntary, non-punitive reporting system. We receive safety reports from people like yourself flying in the airspace system or working in the aviation system. So you'll see the list here: pilots, ATC, cabin crew, dispatchers, ground operations, maintenance, and now UAS operators. We welcome reports describing close calls, hazards, safety-related incidents. It doesn't just need to be a violation. Here are some examples of what you could report if you see an environmental hazard, if there's a miscommunication issue, if there's a near mid-air collision you were involved in, or airspace violation. We encourage you to report anything related to safety. NASA has been operating this program since 1976. We have received more than 1.9 million reports to date. So when in doubt, fill it out, contribute to aviation safety. ASRS has 4 main principles. We are a voluntary program. We ask you to share your story with us. We protect your confidentiality by de-identifying your name, company, and any other information to protect the reporter's identity, which is our #1 priority. Number 3, it is a non-punitive program. Under 14 CFR 91.25 and Advisory Circular 0046F, it states that the FAA will not use, nor will NASA ever provide, any qualifying report submitted to ASRS for use in disciplinary action. And by design, the program is an independent program. NASA serves as the broker between you and any employer, certificate holder, or regulator. Advisory Circular 0046F is found on our website. It was most recently updated in April 2021 to include UAS operators. It describes the use restrictions and the waiver of imposition of sanction. It states that the FAA considers filing a report with NASA ASRS to be indicative of a constructive attitude. Also in 0046F, it states you should report within 10 days of your violation in order to avoid civil penalty or certificate suspension. There are 5 different report forms. They are found on our website, and the link is up here at the top. The first one is a general form. This was our very first form, published in 1976. It is for pilots from general aviation to corporate to commercial operators, as well as dispatchers and ground operations can report on that form. We have 4 additional forms. We have a cabin crew form, maintenance, air traffic, as well as the UAS form shown here on the right. Each of these forms are tailored towards the operations of that particular reporting group. The very top is the ID strip, which is your proof of submission. This comes back in the U.S. mail to you after we receive your report and do our analysis. We also ask you to provide what we call fixed field information. What is the weather? What was your make model? What airspace were you flying in? And lastly, at the very bottom of the form, to describe your event. We call it a narrative. Tell us your story. On the left is an example of a fairly short narrative. We ask you to include, like the narrative on the right, as much information as you can so we can understand the who, the where, the when, the what, and the why of your event. So you'll see this is a UAS example. We can tell this person was flying in the daytime, they were in an open field in uncontrolled airspace, we know their altitude, we know who they were, and they've offered us why they think this happened. We also get over 100,000 reports from manned operations coming into ASRS on an annual basis. So UAS, the form came out, again, April 2021. We're asking recreational flyers, Part 107, Part 135, public operators, and maintenance to use this form to tell us about your event related to UAS or unmanned operations in the aircraft and aviation system. So what happens when the report comes in the door? It comes in electronically. The majority of reports are electronic, or you can send a paper report. Every report is read within 3 to 5 working days by 2 expert analysts on NASA staff. We're looking for rapid identification of safety and hazards. After that, we take an event that might have been reported by more than one person. So say a first officer and a captain reported on the same event. We put those together to provide a richer understanding of that event, and then we code it. Our analysts code hundreds of possible fields that are relevant to that event so that we can then extract that data doing topical searches. After that analysis, we de-identify the reports. Our analysts remove personal and carrier information and any revealing flight details. Then that ID strip is mailed back to you in the U.S. mail. You must furnish that to the FAA to be eligible for protections against disciplinary actions. We also have a lot of great products that come out of our program. We issue hundreds of alert bulletins on an annual basis. We hold FAA and NTSB telecons. We publish a publicly available online database with all the sanitized reports that get full form analysis. We publish safety newsletters, and we hold industry meetings.
Excuse me, could you pause for a second?
This is the
not sure I
interface
can.
for our public database
Hold that
online
question.
tool. It can be found on our website. So, for example, if I were a pilot just starting to fly into San Francisco Airport, I might be interested in what's going on with the taxiways, the runways, anything around operations. I might say, oh, I'll look for something under the date, the last 2 years. I'll go under place, I'll select location, SFO, state, California, and then I'll run the search. I can export it in Word, Excel, or comma-separated values and look at all the fields. There's lots of other fields you can search on, including event, so we call that an anomaly, and so that can include ATC issues, equipment problems. You'll see all the lists are underneath these links as you click on them. And then another powerful part of this tool is searching by text. So if you have a keyword you're looking for, you can type that in and search on that as well. We also encourage you to sign up for our newsletter. We have a monthly newsletter called Callback, and we also have a newer email that comes out, UAS Safety Insight, You can scan that QR code right now and sign up for it and subscribe to Callback on our website. So remember, when in doubt, fill it out. Contribute to aviation safety. Thank you.
Okay.
So, on the slide, she said, once you get the strip back, you have to provide it to the FAA. And I didn't think that was
No,
the case.
no.
It's only if they...
Correct. Great segue, because that's pretty much where I was going to go next. So, two main. Think of the we'll call it the NASA reporting system. Think of this system in two ways. One, it provides you as a pilot with some protection in the event that you are contacted by the FAA for an alleged violation. Two, it's a repository for all sorts of information, observations, insights from pilots, people on the ground, mechanics, even members of the public, to highlight an issue or a situation or a behavior that might be fed back into the overall system of regulation, or some issue at a specific airport. Perhaps it's a runway marking that is confusing, or a taxiway sign that's confusing, to improve the overall level of safety in the industry. And so the carrot, I don't think there's much of a stick, but there is a carrot in this, in that it provides you with protection. So for example, if I'm flying and I inadvertently clip the Class Delta airspace and I haven't spoken to the tower, and I get home and say, I should probably file a safety report on that. Here's why I did it. I got distracted. I had my head down, whatever the issue was. Maybe nothing happens, but if I do hear from the FAA, hey, we tracked you. You entered this airspace without authorization. We want you to talk to a friendly guy from the FAA. If I then say, yes, I'm aware of it, and I actually filed a NASA report, here's the number, they look upon that as being a constructive attitude towards safety, and the chances are there will be no further action taken against you or your certificate. So, and I believe you're allowed one of those get out of jail free cards every 5 years. So that's definitely a benefit, and you can read, when you read a lot of these reports, you can tell they're CYA type filings. Yeah. But a lot of them aren't, so the net result of this carrot and lack of stick is increased knowledge that's fed back to the FAA, NTSB, to hopefully drive improvements into the system, and in particular, those safety aspects related to human behavior. Why I did this, because I got distracted with that, or, there's some other factor. So I think that answered the question, right?
It did. Thank you.
So just to kind of, so again, unlike the NTSB database, which is populated with, due to something material happening that fit one of those confusing rules we looked at earlier, and those NTSB reports are investigated, as you pointed out in your accident, very thoroughly with a very firm structure. The narrative is built. Documents are collected. These reports are only as good as the person submitting them. There's nobody regulating the quality of the information going in, which is why the presenter said, try to tell the story and include, who, what, where, why, how, and as much information as possible. Because you read some of these reports and they're definitely ambiguous and not well written. Others are very well written. So if you do file one, try and take the time to do it right, because that makes it a whole lot more useful. Just to kind of reiterate what the presenter said. So you get this, and this interface hasn't really changed, I think, for 15 years, I think at least. But it works, and just as we explained a scenario in the NTSB accident report search, you might use it, you might narrow it down. Say my example earlier, I'm flying to an unfamiliar airport. I want to see if there are any incidents there relating to taxiways or whatever, and you can craft these search parameters accordingly. I just put in a sample one here. I clicked on state. I put in New Hampshire, Rhode Island, or Massachusetts, flight phase, taxi or takeoff, launch or landing, date of incident between January 2020 and August 2024, and it spit out a whole bunch of reports. I forget how many it spit out. Here's an example one, and this will be a fairly familiar one with many of us here that fly to Block Island in the summer. That's Block Island. I was in the Unicom communication with multiple landing aircraft. I was number 3 to land in a short period of time. I announced crosswind, left downwind turn, base turn onto final 28 BID. While on short final, I heard aircraft Y, and you can see that these are sanitized, just as the presenter said. So you'll get no actual identifying information. We don't know what aircraft Y was or who they are. Aircraft Y announced taking the active from runway 10, in other words, the opposing runway. I quickly communicated I was on short final opposite direction. Aircraft Y responded, I'll be quick, left turn out of your way. I announced for him, turn off next taxi exit. He refused. I was half a mile final, roughly 500 feet, forced to fly a go around outside the runway line. Luckily, there was no traffic on the downwind, or I would have had the incursion to avoid. Very unsafe, inappropriate. It says he didn't hear my communications. I find hard to believe, as 2 other aircraft communicated with me. Ultimately, he responded to me as well. Was his departure time late? Who knows? There you go. If you're going to Block Island, you knew this already. Watch out. Okay, here's another one here's another one that came out of this long list from that query I entered. And I'm just taking a snapshot. The actual report is longer with a bunch of other parameters, but the narrative is the core of any of these reports. I was entering traffic pattern 45 degrees for the downwind 14 at Fitchburg. This was when they had 2 runways at Fitchburg, I guess. Previous announced my intention, located. I turned 45 to downwind, added power to get away from the traffic. Earlier, I heard the conflicting aircraft on the CTAF advise it was on runway on the RNAV 20 practice approach, be breaking off for a straight into 14. Calls to conflicting traffic were not answered. It happened very quickly. I only glanced at the ADSB display, figured my attention should be outside the airplane. Combination of repeated ADSB traffic warnings and not being able to visually see and avoid the traffic was quite stressful. That's kind of becoming common. We're getting very distracted by our automation at the expense of good old-fashioned see and avoid. So perhaps that's one lesson to learn from this particular accident report. Today I was able to get the conflicting traffic's flight path from FlightAware, compare it to my own. He did a low approach. Being more vigilant to visually identify and track what I thought was landing traffic would likely have avoided this dangerous conflict. Why did this person file this? Probably as a CYA, but maybe as a kind of service to those of us reading reports as well. And then this is kind of hard to read, but the presenter mentioned that you can also input text strings. So in this case, this time of year, carbon monoxide might be an issue in our heating systems. So I put in the words carbon and monoxide. You put the and in uppercase. That is a logical operator that says I want to only show me reports with both those words in the output string. And lo and behold, it spit out 3 different examples of when carbon monoxide was an issue. I'm not going to read them through here, but just to give you a sense of what the system can do. Thank you. It's my theme tune.
That's for me, Tom, I'm busy.
All right, so in summary, and some homework for all of us, NTSB reports. Know when one is legally required and how to submit it. User reports as a learning tool, get to know how to retrieve specific reports. Same thing with the ASRS reports, or kind of generally known as NASA reports. submit them to improve the safety of flight operations in general, and to protect yourself in the event of an FAA action relating to your certificate. Use them as a learning tool. Explore different ways to extract specific reports. And that's all I got. So, thank you. We all done? Okay. Any questions? Yes, Bill.
Yeah, so the question is that many people have is whether or not the NASA report is a get-out-of-jail-free card or not. And I did a little bit of research on that about a year or two ago. It turns out that the answer is usually.
Yeah.
Unless it's, you know, there's a couple of different criteria that they look at, and one is whether it's an egregious violation, whether it was deliberate, and whether it's happened before. So, shit, I busted that airspace. Here's a report. I did it again. There it goes again. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
there is that 5-year rule. You can use it once in 5 years. If you try and use it
I hadn't
the
heard
second
about
one.
the 5-year rule, but
Yeah.
I did talk to AOPA, and I looked at it, and I talked to the local FISDO, and basically they want to know whether it's agreed. Is this guy, you know, deliberate, you know, or
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah.
It's a one-time occurrence,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Shit, you know,
Yeah.
it's happened.
Yeah.
And, you know, nobody was hurt. It worked. It all worked out fine. It's fine.
I would say, put it this way: there's only upside from filing a NASA report.
Oh yeah.
Yes, sir.
I have a friend who went through an interesting situation. He actually took the route for somebody who shouldn't have been flying. They were in an antique aircraft and they had a crash. I'm not going to say where. Let's just keep it all smooth. He had to go through a check ride and a whole bunch of other stuff and a lot of paperwork. And the airplane was hauled away. I mean, it was not going to be ferried any place. Because he filed that report immediately and had a super positive attitude, he just slid through the process.
That's a great example.
Attitude, I think, and he's a kind of an abrasive guy. Okay? I've known him for 40 years. Okay? And if you met him, you might like him or you might not like him. That's depending on the day. But he smoothed himself out.
Yeah, that's a great example.
He
Yeah,
sanded off all the rough edges.
Yeah.
And he went in there with a positive attitude. Now, he's got 2,000 or 3,000 hours.
Yeah.
And tail draggers.
Yeah.
Okay? And this was a tail dragger, by the way.
yeah.
It was a steerer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other
File
questions?
those reports.
Actually, just a question about today.
Yes,
Can we get wings credit for today?
yes. The wings forms are on the back table, so if you did not sign up, you don't get credit. And make sure you print your email address clearly, because if I can't read it, you don't get credit. You will have it by Sunday night, usually by the end of night tonight. I have it done, but, and Sal, if you want to just come forward in just a minute.
Just want to mention, Riper's next meeting is January 14th. It's always the second Tuesday of the month. If you're not a member of Rail Pilots, you should be. You can go to ripilots.com and become a member. We don't have a location yet for this next meeting, but we are heading in the direction of a trivia event. So we'll keep you posted. You'll get an email if you're on our email list, or we'll post it to Facebook.
And I'd like to thank Riper, along with Flight Level, and John Salima, who are the sponsors that provide this opportunity. So thank you for coming. Next month it's
Thank
Bob
Mitch
Berlin.
too. Mitch for the setup.
And Mitch, yeah, Mitch is, without Mitch, you don't have a summer.